And away we go, episode 1247 of the Al Galdi podcast. It is Tuesday, January 27th, 2026, and I am over shoveling snow. Are you over shoveling snow? I feel like we all are over shoveling snow. The winter storm in the Washington, D.C. area over the weekend ended up not being as bad as some anticipated. 21 inches? No, not quite. But still, the storm was plenty bad, and the snow followed by the freezing rain, followed by continued frigid temperatures, made for shoveling snow more like shoveling cement. But we did it. Our driveway is more or less good to go. Our streets, that's a different story, but the driveway is more or less good to go. And thankfully, knock on wood, we at no point during the storm lost power or internet. Forget about family. As long as you have power and internet, you are good to go. Hello and welcome to this Tuesday installment of the Al Galdi podcast. The Washington Commanders defensive coordinator search at last is over. Breaking news on Monday night, the team per reports is hiring Minnesota Vikings defensive passing game coordinator / defensive backs coach Daronte Jones as defensive coordinator. The news is broken by ESPN NFL insider Adam Schefter on Monday night in a post on X. Quote, source, Commanders are finalizing a deal to hire Vikings defensive passing game coordinator and defensive backs coach Daronte Jones as their defensive coordinator. Jones has been one of Brian Flores' most trusted defensive coaches the past 3 seasons, and he has also coached under Vance Joseph and Mike Zimmer. End quote. Next segment, reaction to the big news. Daronte Jones, the Commanders' new defensive coordinator. Also on the show, a good friend of this podcast, Commanders insider Ben Standig of Last Man Standing on Substack. He on Monday morning reported that interior defensive lineman Daron Payne is expected to be back with the team for the 2026 season as opposed to the team in the 2026 offseason trading or releasing Payne, as had been anticipated for months. Next segment, reaction to and analysis of this surprising development. What's the thinking from the team's perspective? Is this wise thinking? Washington apparently not yet done with Daron Payne, or as former Redskins quarterback Robert Griffin III said during his time as an ESPN NFL analyst, Daron Payne.
Daron Payne.
That's right, Robert. Daron Payne. Our pal, our homie, Daron Payne.
Daron Payne.
Yeah, Daron Payne. Also on the show, discussion of why the Commanders promoting assistant quarterbacks coach David Blough to offensive coordinator as opposed to waiting to hire fired Miami Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel was understandable. The Los Angeles Chargers on Monday afternoon announced the hiring of McDaniel as offensive coordinator. Monday marked 16 days since the Commanders promoted Blough to offensive coordinator. McDaniel took his time with what he was doing. And on the show, we'll examine a question that we as Washington Wizards fans have been wondering, and that Monumental Basketball president Michael Winger actually answered this past Thursday evening. Did the Wizards make a mistake in trading Deni Avdija? You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. From Matthias on X on the scheduled fun that we had during the opening segment of Monday's show, episode 1246, is Monday was the 34th anniversary of the Redskins' 37-24 win over the Buffalo Bills at the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome in Minneapolis, Minnesota in Super Bowl 26 on January 26th, 1992. And so I played 2 portions of the great NFL Films documentary on the 1991 Skins, writes Matthias. Remember well my parents getting that 1991 team documentary as swag from the local gas station. Ritually watched that VHS every August. And now, on sad late nights, I engage in the deviant act of watching the video on YouTube when I'm particularly nostalgic for the Redskins. Thank you for that, Matthias. There, of course, are many things that we could watch on YouTube, but the NFL Films documentary on the 1991 Redskins may be the most deviant of all of the things that we could watch on YouTube. Email from Doug in Georgia on whether Commanders quarterback Jaden Daniels needs to put on weight. Writes Doug, Hey, Al, longtime listener and huge Commanders fan here in Augusta, Georgia. I'm interested in your perspective on the opinion that Jaden needs to hit the weight room this offseason. I've heard that comment more times than I can count, and after watching this season, I could not disagree more. This past preseason, there was talk about how Jaden had added muscle in the offseason, along with a few pics of him flashing some bigger arms. And guess what? From the very first game, before any reported injury or ailment, I noticed that Jaden's ability to both escape and bounce off defenders was impacted. Think about how many times he left defensive ends and linebackers in the dust in 2024 while he scrambled for 8 to 10 yards for first downs and easily reached the sideline. When he was caught, the defenders were never able to line him up and hit him until later in the season. This season, he was lucky to get 1 to 3 yards on most of those same scrambles, was caught by defenders who had no business catching him, and when he got hit, it was more square. I think you should be focused entirely on speed, agility, and pliability, not weight gain. An extra 10 pounds won't help the injury issues. Contrarily, added weight would probably cost him some of the quickness that makes him a special player. What do you think? Thank you for the email, Doug. Excellent topic. I would not say that Jaden Daniels has to add muscle this offseason. I did not mind him adding some muscle last offseason for the purpose of some extra armor. But, this is the NFL, not the IFBB. That would be the International Fitness and Bodybuilding Federation. The things that Doug mentioned, speed, agility, pliability, those things do matter more for Daniels than body mass or strength. Now, look, I do worry about Jaden Daniels' body type. He's naturally thin. There's no getting around that. The Commanders list Jaden Daniels as being 6'4" and 210 pounds. He, by NFL quarterback standards, is light for being 6'4". For comparison's sake, another Commanders quarterback, Jeff Driscoll, he's listed as being 6'4" and 231 pounds. Same height, but 21 pounds heavier. But I don't think that Daniels this offseason lifting heavy and pounding weight gainer shakes and putting on 10 pounds of body mass all of a sudden would make him less injury prone. You don't want Daniels sacrificing his speed. And more significantly, the way that Daniels becomes less prone to injury is by getting better at avoiding contact. That should be his number one goal this offseason. How do I find the sweet spot of maximizing my elite mobility while lessening the contact that I take? Not an easy thing to do, but it is possible. As far as Daniels, even before his injuries this season, being less impactful as a runner as compared to his all-time great 2024 rookie season. So a few things on that. First of all, his decision-making on read option runs needs to be better. There are 3 types of quarterback runs: scrambles, option runs, and designed quarterback runs. What I'm talking about here are option runs, specifically read option runs, runs on which Daniels, while operating out of the shotgun or pistol, takes the snap, puts the football near the stomach of a running back, and reads the defense to where Daniels either keeps the ball for a rushing attempt or hands the ball to the running back for a rushing attempt. Daniels' decisions on read option runs this past regular season were not great. Way too many of the read option runs with him this past regular season were ineffective, and I do think that that is part of him not being as impactful as a runner this season as he was last season. More on that shortly. But there's also this. Daniels for the 2025 regular season actually was better at generating yards after contact than he was in the 2024 regular season. Daniels in the 2024 regular season per Sport Radar averaged 1.61 yards after contact per rush. Daniels in the 2025 regular season per Sport Radar averaged 1.91 yards after contact per rush. So he this past regular season was better than he was in the 2024 regular season in terms of generating yards after contact. However, Daniels' overall yards per carry for this past regular season was down from the 2024 regular season, 4.79 as compared to 6.02. So why the difference? Well, the difference came via his rushing yards before contact. Daniels in the 2024 regular season per Sport Radar averaged a whopping 4.41 yards before contact per rush. Daniels in the 2025 regular season per Sport Radar averaged 2.88 yards before contact per rush. 4.41 down to 2.88. Big difference. That right there is the drop-off. in his overall yards per carry. And that drop-off is due to several things, including his decision-making on read option runs not always being great, his scrambling decisions not always being great, and him facing some really good defenses. Daniels, over his 7 games in the 2025 regular season, faced 3 of the top 10 defenses in the NFL in terms of total defense per DVOA. The Seattle Seahawks, number 1, the Minnesota Vikings, number 3, and the Los Angeles Chargers, number 10. But regarding Daniels' scrambling decisions not always being great, a big part of that, in my opinion, was the Commanders' receiving core not being great. And Daniels not having guys who were open, and thus opting to run when, with a better receiving core, he wouldn't have had to run. There are so many things that play into quarterback stats. It is an extremely dependent position. But yeah, Daniel certainly can be better as a runner in terms of when to run and how to run. Hey, please consider subscribing to this podcast if you're not already doing that. Subscribing to the podcast costs nothing. Make sure that you never miss an episode. It helps out the podcast a lot. And if you're already subscribing, thank you. This episode of the podcast is for Tuesday, January 27th, 3 weeks to the day of the Washington Commanders parting with offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury, offensive line coach Bobby Johnson, and defensive coordinator Joe Witt Jr. And we now, at last, have the Commanders' new defensive coordinator. Reports on Monday night that the team is hiring Minnesota Vikings defensive passing game coordinator / defensive backs coach Daronte Jones as defensive coordinator. We just learned that he was a candidate on Sunday. We on Sunday morning had reports that the Commanders on Sunday were to interview Jones. He, in fact, was the last reported candidate, and now he's getting a job. Daronte Jones, he's 47. He's from the Washington, D.C. area, went to Bishop McNamara High School in Forestville, Maryland, then went to Morgan State University in Baltimore. Spent 5 of the last 6 seasons with the Vikings. He was the Vikings defensive backs coach for the 2020 and 2022 seasons, was the Vikings defensive passing game coordinator / defensive backs coach for the 2023 through 2025 seasons. So the Vikings for the 2025 regular season were number 3 in the NFL in total defense per DVOA. The Commanders could not get Vikings defensive coordinator Brian Flores, but now the Commanders get a key member of Flores' staff in Jones. So also, Daronte Jones has a connection to the Commanders' QB1, Jaden Daniels. So Jones was LSU's defensive coordinator / defensive backs coach for the 2021 season. Daniels was LSU's QB1 for the 2021 through 2023 seasons. I like the Commanders hiring Daronte Jones as defensive coordinator. Look, there's a lot about him and about all of these candidates that we do not know. Okay, let's be honest about this. But I like the Commanders hiring Daronte Jones as defensive coordinator. A, he has an extensive background in pass defense, which matters more than run defense. B, he comes to the Commanders having been a key part of a great defense in that of the Vikings. C, his coaching background is loaded with bright defensive minds. He has coached under Brian Flores, Vance Joseph, Mike Zimmer, and Marvin Lewis. Now, Daronte Jones is a first-time NFL defensive coordinator, and so the Commanders for the 2026 season will have a first-time offensive coordinator in David Blough and a first-time NFL defensive coordinator in Daronte Jones. Dan Quinn, in a perhaps make-or-break season for him as Commanders head coach, will have a first-time offensive coordinator in David Blough and a first-time NFL defensive coordinator in Daronte Jones. I'll say this about Quinn. I respect the guts, the chops, the stones, the chutzpah it takes to, in a perhaps make-or-break season for him, as not just Commanders head coach, but maybe NFL head coach, have a first-time offensive coordinator in David Blough and a first-time NFL defensive coordinator in Daronte Jones. This was a lengthy, exhaustive search, no doubt. The list of those who the Commanders reportedly interviewed or were to interview for their defensive coordinator vacancy: Las Vegas Raiders defensive coordinator Patrick Graham, Kansas City Chiefs defensive line coach Joe Cullen, Denard Wilson, who spent the last 2 seasons as the Tennessee Titans defensive coordinator, Seattle Seahawks defensive passing game coordinator and defensive backs coach Carl Scott, Minnesota Vikings defensive coordinator Brian Flores, fired Arizona Cardinals head coach and former Philadelphia Eagles defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon, Chicago Bears defensive backs coach / defensive passing game coordinator Al Harris, Terrell Austin, who spent the last 4 seasons as the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive coordinator, and Minnesota Vikings defensive passing game coordinator / defensive backs coach Daronte Jones. 9 candidates. Interesting that, at least as far as we know, fired Atlanta Falcons head coach and former Los Angeles Rams and Atlanta Falcons defensive coordinator Raheem Morris never actually formally interviewed for the Commanders' defensive coordinator vacancy. But the search is done. Daronte Jones gets the job. And he was on the radars for various NFL teams. This from ESPN fantasy football and NFL draft analyst Field Yates on Monday night in a post on X. Quote, Daronte Jones was interviewed by at least 5 teams, end quote, for their defensive coordinator vacancies this month. Well, something that had been considered very likely for the Washington Commanders in their 2026 offseason now is not likely: the team parting with interior defensive lineman Daron Payne. The widespread belief had been that the Commanders in the 2026 offseason were likely to trade or release Payne due to him not having lived up to his big money contract extension and his contract now being in a place to where releasing him made sense. But Commanders insider Ben Standig of Last Man Standing on Substack, he on Monday morning reported that Payne is expected to be back with the team for the 2026 season. Wrote our friend Ben, quote, few roster decisions carry more weight than what's next for Payne, the team's longest tenured position player. He holds Washington's highest 2026 salary cap charge, making him a logical and risky place to look for savings. Moving on with thin and already fragile defensive front, keeping him means betting that his durability and presence still outweigh the cost. At least for now, the Commanders appear inclined to make that bet. Discussions between the two sides have focused on Payne playing out the final year of his contract without a financial restructure, pay cut, or extension, a source close to the situation told Last Man Standing. The current expectation is that Payne will be back for a 9th season, though not all variables are set in stone. The Commanders have yet to hire a new defensive coordinator, a decision that will help shape personnel priorities. Washington enters the offseason with roughly $63 million in cap space, the 6th most in the league. Moving on from Payne would save an additional $16.75 million toward the cap at a time when quarterback Jaden Daniels, playing on a price-controlled rookie contract, allows for aggressive choices by the front office. End quote. So Daron Payne, at least as of right now, is expected to be back with the Commanders for the 2026 season, and the focus as of now has been, quote, Payne playing out the final year of his contract without a financial restructure, pay cut, or extension, end quote. That is especially surprising. There are 2 levels to the surprise with this report from Ben. A, that Payne is expected to be back with the Commanders for the 2026 season. B, that Payne is expected to be back with the Commanders for the 2026 season without a financial restructure, pay cut, or contract extension. Usually in a situation like this, you get a financial restructure, pay cut, or contract extension. Understand that Daron Payne has a scheduled salary cap hit of $27.95 million for the 2026 season per overthecap.com. So I don't necessarily have a problem with the Commanders bringing back Daron Payne for next season. I mean, I certainly would like to know what whoever the team's defensive coordinator for next season thinks of Payne and how that defensive coordinator will use Payne. Ain't no way that I want the Commanders this offseason signing Payne to another contract extension. He has not earned another big money extension. And honestly, we in the 2026 season might get the best of Payne if it is a contract season, right? I mean, the best Daron Payne we ever saw was 2022 contract season Daron Payne. But the Commanders do have ample salary cap space, so it's not like they have to part with Payne. And it's not like there is a lot of talent on the defense otherwise. The Commanders on March 13th, 2023, announced having signed Daron Payne to a contract extension, what was a reported 4-year, $90 million contract extension. The extension came off the team on February 28th, 2023, having applied a franchise tag to Payne. The tag was worth $18.937 million. Washington's previous recent franchise tag dances, those with you-know-who, and right guard Brandon Sheriff had resulted in those guys' franchise tag tenders being at levels at which it behooved the players to play under those tenders. But Payne's situation was different. The market for interior defensive linemen had been expected to skyrocket to where a multitude of interior defensive linemen would have average annual values, AAVs, of more than $20 million. And so Payne's franchise tag was low enough to where there was motivation for him to want to get a multi-year contract extension with the Commanders done in the 2023 offseason, and a contract extension did get done, even though the Commanders at the time, remember, were in the process of being sold. July 21st, 2023 was the closing of the sale of the team from Dan and Tanya Snyder to the Josh Harris Group. Daron Payne, over his first 4 NFL seasons, 2018 through 2021, was a pretty good player, but he also was an inconsistent player, and this was part of the Commanders in the 2022 offseason not even offering Payne a contract extension, as best as we could tell. That gets forgotten, that the team in the 2022 offseason didn't even offer Payne a contract extension, as best as we could tell. But Payne had a monster 2022 season, what was a contract season. Payne, for the 2022 regular season, was tied for 12th in the NFL in sacks at 11.5, finished tied for 4th in the NFL in tackles for loss at 18, and had 5 pass defenses. That 2022 season remains by far Payne's best season, and it is impossible to ignore that that was a contract season. You know, the first 3 letters of Daron Payne's last name are what? P-A-Y. His performance in that 2022 season screamed P-A-Y. Pay me. And the Commanders did pay him. But his production since signing the big money contract extension has been mixed. Pro Football Focus grades are on a scale of 0 to 100, 60 is average. Payne for the 2024 regular season had an overall grade per PFF of just 53.7, had a run defense grade per PFF of just 49.3, and registered 4 sacks, 7 quarterback hits, 5 tackles for loss, and 2 pass defenses. Payne for the 2025 regular season had an overall grade per PFF of 60.8 and registered 3 sacks, 8 quarterback hits, and 7 tackles for loss. However, he also had 5 pass defenses, and he did rank number 5 among all qualified NFL defensive tackles in ESPN's run-stop win rate at 41.24%. So he, since signing the big money contract extension, has not been all bad, but he has not performed at the level of that contract. Payne has an AAV of $22.5 million, ranking tied for number 10 among all interior defensive linemen in the NFL per overthecap.com. He has not produced at the level of being top 10 in the NFL in AAV among interior defensive linemen. I do give Daron Payne big-time credit for being durable, especially with how injury-ravaged the Commanders were this season. Payne, over his 8 NFL seasons, has played in 130 of a possible 133 regular season games. Actually, 2 of the missed games came in the 2025 regular season, but one was due to suspension. Payne, in the 2025 regular season, played in 15 of the Commanders' 17 games. He did not play in the Commanders' 16-13 overtime loss to the Miami Dolphins in Madrid, Spain on November 16th due to suspension. The NFL on November 10th announced that Payne had been suspended without pay for 1 game. This for throwing a punch at Detroit Lions receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown during the Commanders' 44-22 loss to the Detroit Lions at Northwest Stadium on November 9th. and Payne for the Commanders' 30-23 loss to the Dallas Cowboys at Northwest Stadium on Christmas was inactive due to a back injury, but he overall has been really durable, and he's still not even in his 30s. The Redskins took Daron Payne with the number 13 overall pick in the 2018 NFL Draft out of the University of Alabama. He was just 20 when he was drafted. He was very young for his draft class. The 2026 season will be his 9th NFL season, but just his age 29 season. One more thing on Daron Payne. So Pro Football Reference has a stat called approximate value, which is similar to wins above replacement WAR in baseball. And per Pro Football Reference, quote, is an attempt to put a single number on the seasonal value of a player at any position from any year since 1960, end quote. Approximate value is for regular seasons only. If you go by approximate value, Daron Payne is the third most valuable defensive tackle in Commanders franchise history. Yes, number 3. That may sound crazy, but in terms of approximate value, Payne is number 3. Dave Butts is number 1 among all defensive tackles in franchise history, and Pro Football Reference's approximate value at 104. Daron Talbert is number 2, 77. Daron Payne is number 3, 61. Darrell Grant is number 4, 59. And Jonathan Allen is number 5, 57. That is something. Defensive tackles in franchise history in terms of regular season approximate value. Number 1, Dave Butts, of course. He's the greatest interior defensive lineman in franchise history. Number 2, Daron Talbert. Makes sense. He was a tremendous player for the Redskins in the 1970s. And number 3, Daron Payne, who it appears is likely to stick around for at least one more season. Our guy, Daron.
Daron Payne.
Yes, thank you, RG3. Daron Payne. Hey, if you are planning a wedding or you know someone who is, check out or have that person check out cateringbyuptown.com. Catering by Uptown delivers not just delicious food of the highest quality, but also a flawless and memorable experience tailored to your special day. Catering by Uptown's team is dedicated to meeting your every need with elegance and precision. If you visit cateringbyuptown.com and click on venues, you can set up your own personal tour of one of Catering by Uptown's premier venues, including outstanding waterfront venues. Also, Catering by Uptown is great for parties, so whether a birthday, an anniversary, a retirement, or a charity gala, Catering by Uptown understands that special events deserve to be celebrated in style. Catering by Uptown takes care of every detail so that you can enjoy your event. Catering by Uptown is a family business. It is run by the Pereiras, who are great Commanders fans and loyal supporters of this podcast. Visit cateringbyuptown.com and make sure that you mention that Al Galdi sent you. That's cateringbyuptown.com, and make sure that you mention that Al Galdi sent you. The Los Angeles Chargers on Monday afternoon announced the hiring of Mike McDaniel as offensive coordinator, closing the book on something that's worth discussing. So the Miami Dolphins on January 8th announced the firing of McDaniel as head coach, and many Washington Commanders fans and media members, myself included, immediately said that the team should hire McDaniel as offensive coordinator, and the team getting him as offensive coordinator didn't seem that far-fetched given his deep ties to Commanders general manager Adam Peters and Commanders head coach Dan Quinn. We first met Mike McDaniel as an offensive assistant for the Redskins for the 2011 through 2013 seasons, including being the Skins receivers coach for the 2013 season. He was an offensive assistant for the San Francisco 49ers for the 2017 through 2021 seasons. He was the Niners run game specialist for the 2017 season, was the Niners run game coordinator for the 2018 through 2020 seasons, and was the Niners offensive coordinator for the 2021 season. Adam Peters worked for the Niners throughout Mike McDaniel's time with the Niners. Peters worked for the Niners January 2017 to January 2024. He was their vice president of player personnel January 2017 to February 2021. He was their assistant general manager February 2021 to January 2024 when he became Commanders GM. Also, McDaniel was an offensive assistant for the Atlanta Falcons for the 2015 and 2016 seasons under Dan Quinn. Quinn was the Falcons head coach February 2015 to October 2020. And McDaniel has talked about how Quinn helped McDaniel in his battle with alcoholism. McDaniel has been open about that. So the Commanders getting McDaniel as their offensive coordinator seemed plausible. However, it quickly became clear that he had options, many options. And the Commanders, just 2 days after McDaniel was fired, filled their offensive coordinator vacancy. The team on January 10th announced having promoted assistant quarterbacks coach David Blough to offensive coordinator. And so now that Mike McDaniel has taken an offensive coordinator job, the question becomes, should the Commanders have waited on McDaniel so that they could have him as their offensive coordinator instead of the unproven David Blough? And here's how I would answer that. Yes, it would have been great for the Commanders to have gotten Mike McDaniel as their offensive coordinator. But also, yes, McDaniel took a long time to figure out what he was doing. And the well-regarded David Blough could have/would have been long gone by the time McDaniel decided what he was doing, with zero guarantee that what he would be doing would be joining the Commanders. It is so easy to hindsight this and yell and scream that the Commanders botched this. It's a little harder to look at the facts and recognize that if the team really likes and believes in Blough, then the team waiting on McDaniel may well have resulted in the team getting neither McDaniel nor Blough. The Commanders on January 10th announced having promoted David Blough to offensive coordinator. It wasn't until more than 2 weeks later, January 26th, that the Chargers announced the hiring of McDaniel as offensive coordinator. He took his time figuring out what he was doing. I mean, did you see what NFL insider Diana Rossini of The Athletic this past Saturday morning posted on X? Quote, update, Mike McDaniel pulled out of his scheduled meeting down in Florida with the Bills yesterday, I'm told, and the two sides never met. McDaniel remains in contention for the Raiders head coaching job, but if he takes an OC position, it's still expected to be with the Chargers, end quote. Yeah, there was a lot going on with this guy, and understandably so. He had options. But the Commanders really like and believe in David Blough. Are they right? Who knows? But they couldn't afford to wait, and I get that. Remember, the Detroit Lions reportedly were interested in David Blough for their offensive coordinator vacancy. There's also this, too. Given how well Adam Peters and Dan Quinn know Mike McDaniel, I think that it is entirely possible that Peters and or Quinn talked to McDaniel shortly after he was fired by the Dolphins to see where his head was at before Peters and Quinn promoted Blough to offensive coordinator. So it's possible that McDaniel conveyed to the team that he was not interested in its offensive coordinator vacancy. You know, there's a belief that McDaniel wanted a job in a warm weather market. Washington, D.C., especially right now, not exactly a warm weather market. It is going to be interesting to see how Mike McDaniel coexists with Chargers head coach Jim Harbaugh. I do think that McDaniel could do a lot of good things with the Chargers QB1 Justin Herbert, just like I think that McDaniel could do a lot of good things with the Commanders QB1 Jaden Daniels. But I get why the Commanders promoted David Blough to offensive coordinator. The number one question with their change at offensive coordinator to me is whether there should have been a change at offensive coordinator, whether they should have parted with Cliff Kingsbury. But that's a separate topic. Specific to promoting David Blough and not waiting on Mike McDaniel, I get what the team was thinking. The Washington Wizards, for a second consecutive season, have had 3 players selected for the Rising Stars roster as part of NBA All-Star Weekend. The team on Monday night announced that Alex Sarr, Keyshawn George, and Trey Johnson have been selected to the 2026 Rising Stars roster. Meantime, the Wizards are home to the Portland Trail Blazers on Tuesday night at 7. It is not often that we on this podcast these days, with the Wizards being a rebuilding and tanking team, do a preview segment for a Wizards game, but that's not what this segment is. Note, the purpose of this segment is to examine something that, if you're a Wizards fan like me, is impossible not to wonder with the Wizards playing the Blazers. Did the Wizards make a mistake in trading Deni Avdija? The Wizards in the 2024 NBA draft supercharged their rebuild by trading Deni Avdija and making 3 picks in the first round. The Wizards, on the day of the first round of the 2024 NBA Draft, Wednesday, June 26, 2024, made 2 trades. Among them, the Wizards traded Deni Avdija to the Portland Trail Blazers for point guard Malcolm Brogdon, the draft rights to Carlton Bub Carrington, a first-round pick in the 2029 NBA Draft, and second-round picks in the 2028 and 2030 NBA Draft. So the trade was officially announced on July 6th, 2024. The Wizards took Deni Avdija with the number 9 overall pick in the 2020 NBA Draft. They, in October 2023, signed him to a multi-year contract extension, what reportedly was a 4-year, $55 million contract extension, taking him through the 2027-2028 season. Just his age 27 season. Yeah, he's young. This is just his age 25 season. Now, I'm not going to be a phony about this. I applauded Monumental Basketball president Michael Winger and Wizards general manager Will Dawkins for trading Avdija. Not because I didn't like Avdija as a player. I did and do. I applauded the trade because it was an aggressive trade. It was an example of a front office selling high on a guy whose timeline may not have fit the team's rebuild. The trade, in theory, was an instance of the Wizards being forward-thinking, something that they had not been in forever. And so maybe I was blinded by that, but I applauded the trade. Well, Deni Avdija is putting up some big numbers. Avdija for this regular season as of games through Sunday was number 12 among all qualified players in the NBA in points per game, 26.02. Number 16 among all qualified players in the NBA in points per 100 possessions, 35.5. Number 11 among all qualified players in the NBA in assists per game, 6.86. Number 18 among all qualified players in the NBA in assist percentage, 31.9. Number 2 among all qualified players in the NBA in free throw attempts per game, 9.76. And if you want to go really advanced, number 8 among all qualified players in the NBA in value over replacement player per Basketball Reference, 2.6. Number 13 among all qualified players in the NBA in box plus minus per Basketball Reference, 5.0. On and on I could go, but you get the idea. Now, Avdija for this regular season as of games through Sunday also was number 1 in the NBA in most turnovers, 162. So he has not been an extremely efficient player, but he is producing. Meantime, Bub Carrington is doing well for the Wizards. He's far from a finished product, but there to me is a lot to like with him. He's tough. His shooting is getting better. He's generating assists. He can rebound. He has been incredibly durable. You know, Carrington, over his 2 NBA regular seasons, has played in every one of the Wizards games, and he is really young. This is just Carrington's age 20 season. Malcolm Brogdon, a product of the University of Virginia, he this past October announced his retirement, and we'll see what comes of the picks that the Wizards got for Deni Avdija. The Wizards got a first-round pick in the 2029 NBA Draft and second-round picks in the 2028 and 2030 NBA Drafts. Michael Winger this past Thursday evening did a press conference during which he addressed the state of the Wizards. We, during that presser, had this exchange.
Michael, Josh Robbins from The Athletic. I know hindsight is 2020. It's now been 18 months since the team traded Deni. Was that trade a mistake?
No, it was not a mistake. I'm very, very happy for Deni. We're all very happy for Deni. We saw Deni as a very high-level ascending player. Super happy for him, super happy for the Blazers. We've got a lot of friends there with the Blazers. But no, because we did it for the reasons we said then, which is to, in effect, take us back a couple years so that we could reset the roster and everybody was sort of on the same age curve, and Deni's ahead of that.
So Michael Winger saying that the Wizards trading Deni Avdija was not a mistake and explained why. And I don't think that Winger is necessarily wrong, at least not yet. Still a lot to be determined with what the Wizards got for Avdija. But yeah, this is a conversation. Like, this is a debate because Avdija for the Blazers has been really good. And, you know, if the Wizards next season do stop the tank and do truly start trying to win, well, it'll turn out that Avdija did fit their timeline. And that'll do it for you and me for now. Keep the feedback coming. You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. Wednesday's show, episode 1248, will include a lot for you on the Washington Commanders. Also on Wednesday's show, I'll talk Washington Capitals, Washington Wizards, and college basketball. The Caps are at the Seattle Kraken Tuesday night at 10. The Wizards are home to the Portland Trailblazers Tuesday night at 7. Number 17 Virginia is at Notre Dame Tuesday night at 7. Virginia Tech is home to Georgia Tech Tuesday night at 8. George Washington is at number 21 St. Louis Tuesday night at 8. And VCU is home to Richmond Tuesday night at 7. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
Daron Payne.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.